This is Krista from bitesizetravel.ca here with the second set of photos from my recent Camino de Santiago. This covers the second 100 kilometers of my journey from Ponferrada to Porto Marine. So day 6 was the first day I encountered the bed race. Starting in Ponferrada, I got to see some of the charming signs that you see on the way out of town, and some of the you see some of the more charming commemorations of the Santiago, the Apostle, as well as helpful signage along the way. This was the first day I really encountered the bed race, where there are a lot of people heading in the same general direction. In this case, it was Via Franca, and you learned a valuable lesson that day of either booking ahead or stopping when you first see a place, because I ended up walking a little longer than I intended to find a bed to sleep in that night. There's lots of dramatic cloud in the sunrise that morning, and just lots of really lovely things to see, including this group of Italian cyclists who were shouting "Buen Camino" and supportive words to the walkers that were going by. And these guys and I kept on leapfrogging each other, so I actually got quite a few shout outs from them that day, and they were lovely, just a lot of fun. This is an example of the kind of do-it-yourself signage that you see along the way. This part of the Camino crosses a fairly busy secondary highway, so you have a helpful sign there to tell people to be mindful and to watch out for traffic, because it is very easy to be trapped in your thoughts, or perhaps listening to music and not paying attention to traffic as attentively as you might need to. So heading into Via Franca, there was very dramatic cloud and fog around that day, but a lot of the day is spent walking around or through vineyards, particularly if you take the diversion through Valtui, and it was just conditions were nice. There were lots of really lovely, friendly people around, and it was just a really nice way to spend some time that day, even if it was an extra 3 to 4 kilometers of walking. And finally, when I did make it to Via Franca, I stayed at the marvelous Albergue de la Piedra, at the albergue on a rock. This one quite literally is built around a rock, which is in the common room. Day 7, I say this was my first favorite place, but there were lots of places I really loved and enjoyed along the way. And one of the highlights of this day, among running into some friends again I hadn't seen since my first day, was just stopping for a quick moment to watch a local woman roast a giant supply of red peppers that were there on an open flame. And it was kind of lovely to just watch it slowly happen in front of us as the day wore on. Not everything that you get to walk on the Camino de Santiago is ideal, quiet country road. In this case, you're on a grade separated sidewalk that runs along a pretty major highway. And so while it is less than ideal, it is part of the journey, and it's important that you're prepared for that. Though you should know, for the part of the Camino I did, this was really the exception rather than the rule. It was very infrequent that you were actually walking on highway like that. Heading into Vega de Valcarce, you see one of many lovely statues of Santiago, and this was a particularly noteworthy one because it gave a general idea of how far away you were from Santiago, and there seems to be a great disagreement among all of the signage on the Camino how far you actually are at any one point. This is where we are on approach to Ocebrero, and you start seeing notifications to rent horses if you would like to use those instead of walking up the 800 meters or so elevation that's coming for you the next day. Finally, we stayed in Vega overnight, and it was just such a lovely, charming town, and we had such a marvelous experience with the small private albergue where we stayed, and got to dip our feet in the cool, rushing water of the Rio Valcarce. Just a really marvelous place. I would love to go back and just spend a couple of days there just watching the river flow by. Day 8 was, even though it was among the more average distance days, it was by far one of the more vigorous climbs. This was a 24-kilometer day with over 800 meters of elevation into the mountains, into Galicia. And the day, luckily for us, had great weather, and it started out very beautiful and mysterious with this low-lying fog. We got to see some of the famous horses that had been promoted the previous day. And they actually did pass us on the way up the mountain because someone who is a little smarter than us decided to rent them. Going into Galicia, just past Ocebrero, you're on the top of the mountains, and you get to look out and see for ages this beautiful view of just the whole world just laying in front of you. And again, at one of the high points, you see this giant statue of Santiago bracing himself against the brutal winds that are blowing over Galicia from the Atlantic Ocean. And there is a noticeable change in conditions when you get to this point in the Camino, because now you can you can be on the receiving end of some pretty brisk winds from the Atlantic. So well into Galicia now, my Camino family and I opted to take the road less taken on a 20-kilometer route that took us from Fonfria in Galicia to Samos, and we started our morning with this lovely sunrise over the mountains and the countryside below, and in through a bunch of smaller towns that I think it's a shame a lot of people don't see, because you see really interesting, charming things like this hayloft that has its own river and small waterfall. And again, on the Samos path, it is a bit of a quieter trail, so you get to enjoy this lovely tree canopy and quiet trail. And along this particular part of the route, every once in a while, a chicken would run out in front of you, which is really some of the most excitement that you're likely to encounter. But finally, we reached Samos, and it was every bit as lovely as we had been promised, and even were able to take a quick tour with the brothers that night. And we had this guy. He looks kind of stern in the picture, but he was actually very lovely and friendly, and shared lots of information about the monastery with us. Day 10, I call this entering the Camino Crush, because we're getting to about 100 kilometers away from Santiago de Compostela, and traffic, as it were, on the Camino steps up significantly. But there are still these quiet moments where you get to see rather marvelous things, like this bull just having a little graze in a bit of a forest with some piles of sticks, just keeping him company. In Sarria, which is the 100-kilometer mark to Santiago, we visited another small monastery, which doubled as the gym for the school that was attached to it. And while we were visiting the monastery, there was a class of kids having foot races right outside of our door, which was a lot of fun. Just we let them run through, and then we would wait until there was a break in the action and walk across ourselves. This is one of many of the things that you find when you're outside of the towns. In between towns, there'll be a table laid out with snacks and juice and water for pilgrims who need them along the way. And these things are generally offered by Donativo. So if you have a euro or two to spare for some refreshment, it's appreciated by the people that provide them. And finally, that night, we stayed past Sarria in a small town called Barbadello, and one of the glorious things that we did was get to walk through these fields upon fields of sunflowers, just enjoying their last little bit of summer. So day 11, with less than 100 kilometers to Santiago de Compostela, again, the traffic is up significantly, but you do have this lovely, if you get up early enough, you have these lovely quiet moments to yourself on the path. And with the increase in traffic comes the increase in other unpleasantries, like these really colorful graffiti. But at this 100-kilometer marker, which is very typical of the markers you see in Galicia, this one has been a little more decorated, let's say, than some of the others along the way. Again, just another little quiet path that we had all to ourselves. Over on the right-hand side of this image, you see a very typical yellow marker for the Camino to let you know that you are headed on the right way. And that day we arrived in Puerto Marin, and after crossing across the river, you dart across traffic and head up this pilgrim pass, I guess. You see there's a Camino marker there that tells you this is your way into town. And you get to spend a night in a really charming little town with a lovely central square where everybody congregates. And again, you get to see people that you may not have seen for a couple of days, and maybe get to meet for a drink and catch up. And it's just a really nice little town along the way. And again, they have a lovely statue of Santiago who's pointing you on your way out of town if you're just stopping over in Puerto Marin briefly.